Associates. For those of you that aren't familiar with Bills, I'd like to give you a little background. We've been in the Infor ecosystem for over 26 years. We're entirely Infor focused. We do nothing but Infor implementations, upgrades, and managed services. We support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, and Cloud Suite, including HCM, finance, and supply chain. We have been recognized and given partnering awards in the last 8 out of the last 10 years. Our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in the space and the equivalent in professional experience. Some are former benefit managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. Some exciting news happened early this year. Bales became part of Nordic, an industry-leading healthcare consulting firm. We'll operate as a wholly owned subsidiary and continue to be led by Jamie Bales. Nordic will provide us with resources to fund our growth, expand our business, and support our customers more effectively. For our healthcare customers, it allows us to bring together Nordic's capabilities in the EHR space to provide a more holistic solution, including specific expertise in EHR and ERP integration. This combination will offer a best practice model to reduce implementation risks and leveraging the data from both systems to drive insights and outcomes. So with that, Dawn, we can jump right in.
Okay, there is a disclaimer page. Brian, do you want to go over this, or do we just kind of jump through that?
We just put it up. We really don't touch base on it. I mean, it's there, but.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, welcome, everybody. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to speak about organizational change management. So for those of you who weren't sure what OCM actually was, organizational change management, and I'm the OCM practice lead for the Bales organization. I've been doing change management for well over 20 years. I won't tell you exactly because that will give away my age. But for the most part, I've been driving organizational change management in projects that are enterprise IT implementations or large business transformation programs.
Enter your access.
Here's some background noise there. A little bit about my background. So like I said, I've been doing organizational change management for a very long time. From an academic perspective, I have an MBA from the Free University of Brussels in Belgium. I do have a master's degree in organizational leadership from Geneva College in Pennsylvania. And I really, although I've grown up in the IT domain, it's people that really make the IT work, and understanding the people side of a change is really important. So in my practice, in our practice at Bales, we look at, and I'll walk you through our methodology, but we focus on strategy and aligning leaders, communication. We leverage things like the ADKAR model, which you may have heard of. We do target operating model design and transformation, business process evaluation, redesign, et cetera, job design, performance management. So I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different disciplines within a business. I have worked on several ERP packages, obviously Infor. I also have spent a lot of time in my past with the Oracle e-business suite as well as SAP. So I've seen the spectrum of the ERPs. As far as industry experience, I have a strong background in manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, and consumer product manufacturing, utilities, government, healthcare, and financial services. So that's a little bit about me and the background that I bring for today's conversation. And as you know, the title of our conversation today is, why is it important to include organizational change management in your ERP project? And I'm going to start you out with some startling statistics. 60% of ERP projects fail. These are statistics from Gartner, by the way. 80% of customers are unhappy with their current ERP system. 90% of ERP projects fail to deliver measurable return on investment. 95% of failure companies that failed at their ERP implementation, dedicated less than 10% of their total project budget on education, training, and change management. So now that I have set you up with a bit of fear, and maybe you're thinking, gee, why in the world would we do an ERP implementation? Or if you're thinking positively, what can I do to make sure my ERP implementation does not fail? You're in the right spot. So we're going to address some of those factors that cause ERP projects to fail or not produce the return that we expected when we set out on the journey. So we'll talk through that today. And I will also share our methodology on how we integrate a change management program in your overall ERP project plan. So you saw the statistics, lots of failures. Maybe you're in the middle of one now. Maybe you're seeing some issues. So let's talk about why projects fail. This is research that is done by an organization. It's a globally recognized organizational change management organization called ProSci, which 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was initially trained in that methodology. But every year they do surveys for companies who are going through large transformations, whether it's an ERP, a merger and acquisition, a digital transformation. And they poll the executives, they poll the project leaders, managers, supervisors across organizations to understand why projects are failing or what's going right in them. In this case, here are the results from a survey that they've conducted. ERP projects fail primarily, number one reason is employee and staff resistance. So you've got employees, staff who are our end users. We call them our stakeholders. They are fearful of what's happening. They are potentially afraid of learning something new, that they won't make the grade. They're afraid of moving outside of their comfort zone. And a lot of times what we'll see is if we are not addressing the fears and the concerns that our frontline employees have, that they'll start to talk around the water cooler. And instead of everybody getting on board to support this change, you've now got this tone permeating through your organization amongst your frontline users, a tone of negativity. And then the resistance begins to set in. The second reason is middle management resistance. So at the top of the house, you may have your CEO, your CIO, your CFO, your CHRO, all aligned behind this ERP implementation that it's going to transform the organization, create operational efficiencies, you know, all of the fantastic benefits that an ERP brings. But then down the next level of management where the rubber begins to hit the road, managers are not as engaged, not as aligned with the C-suite, if you will. They might fear power shifts, right? That their scope of control changes as processes change and authorities change. And so you can sometimes feel a sense of resistance among middle management. If middle management is not then cascading the information of benefits and the reason why to change down to their people, down to the frontline employees, then that is going to create a barrier to your success as well. Number three is poor executive sponsorship. Every project needs to have a sponsor. And I mentioned I spent a lot of time in manufacturing. So I had a boss one time who always said, well, who's the one throat to choke? And as much as I hate that saying, there does need to be that one throat to choke at the end of the day, or that one person, like I like to put it, that one person that we're going to pat on the back for getting it done. Every project needs to have an executive sponsor. And that executive sponsor has a very active role. They must be out in front, being active, being visible, engaging with the team, and leading the organization through change. And what we find is that is the third largest reason for failure, that we have a sponsor may be identified. Sometimes we have seen in some cases where a sponsor is not identified. But when you do have a sponsor who's identified, they just sort of are sitting back in the corner office and hoping that it all gets done out in front of us. That is not going to help a project. Number four is limited time, limited budget, or limited resources. So if we're not giving our project teams adequate time to complete the project, if resources are strained, perhaps we're keeping our full-time regular job, but also on the project. So now we're spending time and a half in our careers because we've got our regular job to do plus project stuff. And that begins to put a strain on the people, which puts the project at risk. And then finally, number five is corporate inertia and politics. There, we have seen, maybe you have seen or felt that an organization may have an approach of we've always done it this way. And there is a cultural understanding that we don't like change and we don't change. I worked in the steel industry, and I was brought in at a higher level in the steel company. So when I would go to the steel plant, the first thing anyone would say to me is, well, how much time have you spent on the floor? Right? How much time have I spent on the manufacturing floor? And because I had not, I couldn't possibly have any knowledge, and I held no credibility with people. So that was something about that steel industry culture that if you didn't start out your career on the manufacturing plant floor to work your way up, then you mustn't know anything. But that was just part of the tone of that culture. And you may experience that in some of your organizations, that if we want to implement a change, we want to implement a new IT system, but the culture, the folks in the organization may push back against it. So let me ask you, and feel free to chime in if you're brave enough to do so. What do you see in common about all of these items, all 5 of these obstacles to success, really? Any common themes? Anyone want to give it a shot? This is all about people. On these obstacles to success for an ERP project, in the top 5, there's nothing in the top 5 about the technology not working or the Infor HCM product not being good enough or interfaces or nothing about IT in here. This is all about people. So that is why organizational change management is so important. If we do not manage the people side of change in an ERP project, it could negatively impact our project success, and it can introduce risk to our ERP project. That's why organizational change management is so critical. And to all of my IT brethren out there, the IT part, the technology piece, is the easiest. You can control the technology. You can configure for supply chain management. You can write interfaces and make sure that they are working smoothly. You can convert data and make that work. But when we're dealing with people, behaviors, emotion, fear, if we ignore that, the whole project can be undermined. So that's why we address organizational change management in the ERP project. So how do we manage the change? Who's responsible for this? So for anybody who's on this call, if you are part of any type of change initiative in your organization, you can play a critical role. This change management is for the executives, certainly at the top of the house, top of your organization. Managers and supervisors play a key role. Frontline employees play a role in successfully navigating through change. Your consultants, your project managers, anyone who's engaged, everybody has a role to play in leading and managing the change that an ERP system introduces to the organization. So let's kind of bring it back down to some definitions here. And what is change management? We're talking about it, we hear it. For those of you who are in the IT space, you may use change management from a perspective, a governance perspective of how do we manage changes to our IT systems. That's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is organizational change management. So how do we prepare, how do we equip, and how do we support our individual employees through the change journey that they're about to embark upon? When you introduce an ERP system to your organization or any other transformation project, a merger and acquisition, a digital transformation, a strategy realignment, all of it requires the active and proactive management of the people. When people have to change, we want to support, the better we can prepare them, equip them, and support them, the better they'll make it through to the other side of the change. And I'll step back for a moment And just to give you an example, think about in your own personal life when you've wanted to make a change. So imagine maybe you wanted to quit smoking, or you wanted to change your diet or get into a better fitness routine, or like Brian, run a marathon. So in order to run a marathon, we have to prepare ourselves. We have to equip ourselves. We need the appropriate support, right? We can't just jump off of the couch tomorrow and expect to run 26.2 miles. We have to prepare. We have to equip. We have to support. And, you know, it's a long journey, and we need structures in place around us. We need coaches in place around us. We want our friends and family to support us, right? So that in those tough days of training for the marathon, when we start to get down or start to get discouraged, a good coach, or, you know, your spouse is right next to you saying, keep going, you can do this. So even though we're talking about change in the workplace, we're still talking about individuals who have to do something completely different than what they're used to doing. And the best way to ensure success is to ensure that we are supporting them, that we're equipping them, and we're preparing them. I'm going to take a quick break there. Does anyone have any questions around the definition for organizational change management?
I don't see anything in the chat right now.
Okay, very good. Then I will move on. So this slide here is really, I know it's really, really busy, but I'm going to use this slide to talk to you about what is critical, what is important to manage when we're going into a project that is going to initiate change in our organization. We're going to start at the very top. These are what I call the levers for success for managing a change in your organization. Starting at the top, at the 12 o'clock hour there, you see the box that says vision, clarity, and business case. The first thing that an organization really needs to do is understand where they're trying to go with the decision to implement an ERP or even to do a significant upgrade. Where are we going? What are our goals and our objectives in implementing the Infor system? And why are we doing it? We've got to tell a compelling story to our organization so that they understand where we're going and why we're going there. It helps to set the foundation of communications, and it helps to get people on board, helps to build a buy-in. So we tell a compelling story about where we're going and why we are going there and why we're doing it now. Sometimes we have to share the story of the risk of not making the change to our IT systems. So, and I'll step back from there. So we're implementing the Infor Cloud Suite, for instance. Yes, it is a technology project, but if you're implementing a new ERP for the first time, or you're switching from one ERP to a new one, that is going to cause changes to your business processes. It may change job roles and responsibilities. It may require the building of new skills. It may require the restructuring of your organization. So whereas it starts out as an IT project, there is so much impact on the people in your organization in terms of how they might have to do their work. It's not just simply about learning new keystrokes on the laptop so that they can perform their transactions, but typically an ERP implementation is going to change business process. It's going to change roles and responsibilities. So this is why we have to spend that time preparing our people, because it's not just a technology project where you turn on the switch and everyone starts doing it magically tomorrow. So this is why we tell the compelling story, get people on board. The next thing that is important to do is really identify who the project sponsor is going to be and ensure that leadership is aligned with that vision. I'll give you an example. I had a client one time where the CEO, the CIO, Chief Information Officer, and the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, when I first met them, said, oh, we're all aligned, our vision is clear, we know where we're going. And then I delivered a survey to them. And I asked each of the 3 C-level executives, what are your 3 main goals for this project? And when I got the results back, do you know I had 9 different goals? None of the 3 were aligned. The CFO, for instance, said her main objective was to have a data warehouse built so that she can do analytics for all of the financial work. The CIO had no interest in building a data warehouse. So if you have at the top of the house, the top of your organization, misaligned on what the project is actually supposed to achieve, can you imagine what's happening at the lower levels of your organization when you have the finance team working with the IT team? They're probably at each other's throats because they're on different pages. The IT boss is saying, we're not building a data warehouse. The CFO boss, the CFO team is saying, no, we need a data warehouse. So one of the first things that we do is make sure that our leaders are all aligned around the vision, around the business case, the goals and objectives of the project. When I talked a little bit about the sponsor being such a critical factor for success of a project, what's really important is that the sponsor have a roadmap. If you're named as a sponsor on a project, chances are that you probably have never been a sponsor of a large transformation in the past, so you might not know exactly what to do. So what we do is we build a roadmap for our sponsors to help them understand critical milestones through the project, what they should be looking for, what they should be doing, when they should be engaging with the project team, when they should be engaging with their peers, and when they should be engaging with the end users of the system that we're implementing. So we give them that coaching, we give them that guidance, and we provide them with content even to say, hey, go and speak to your peers, make sure they're all aligned, tell them this about the project and tell them what you need from them. Or we'll prepare content that says, now go and speak to your project team. They're about to get ready to do a conference room pilot. We want you to go and encourage them, and the sponsor will go give an uplifting message so that the team feels motivated and engaged and ready to do the conference room pilot. So we build out a map for the sponsor and for the other leaders. The other thing in this box that we focus on is identifying influencers and other change leaders throughout the organization, because it's not just the sponsor's responsibility to ensure that change occurs. So we work with other members in the organization and provide coaching plans to them as well. The next thing that's important, and now I'm down around the 3 o'clock hour, is effective planning in teams. What's important is to make sure that your organizational change management plan, that you have a plan, number one, and that it's integrated into the overall project management work breakdown structure of that plan, because there are change management activities that follow along with the standard phases of a project implementation. The other thing that we do in this category is to make sure our project team is prepared. Sometimes we have project team members from the client who have never served on a project before. They don't know that there are 5 phases in a standard waterfall project. They don't know that there are milestones that have to be met before moving on to the next stage. So we'll give them a Project Management 101 course. We'll help them understand what their role and responsibility is on the team so that you have an effective team doing your design of your future state, doing your build of your system, and really doing a good job testing and vetting the system so that it is ready for use upon go live. So then the next category of information is down around the bottom. I have stakeholder commitment and change specific communications along the same line because they're so integrated. So the next thing that you have to do is identify who is impacted by this change. And a lot of times we stop short and just say, well, this is a financial project, so it's going to affect our accountants, our accounts payable clerks, our folks in receivables who are collecting the cash, and our accountants who are managing the general ledger and doing financial reporting. And that's the end of the day. Well, we sometimes
Dawn, we lost your audio if you can hear us.
Folks, am I back with you? I seem to have lost my
Yes.
audio.
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, I apologize for that technical glitch. I am going to reshare the presentation and pick up where we left off there.
Sounds good.
So quick switch of audio here. Okay, so back to where we were with stakeholder commitment and change communications. As I mentioned, sometimes we fall a little short in truly identifying everybody who is impacted by the change. We have to think about others within our internal organizations as well as external outside of our organization. So do our auditors need to be made aware of the change? If we're making changes to our financial system, what changes to our controls do we need to consider? And how do we inform our auditors that we've changed our controls, the controls that we've put in place? Perhaps we're doing supply chain. Do we have to have conversations with our vendors? So we identify all of the stakeholders, and then we build a map on when we need to communicate with them and what messages we need to deliver. So the messages that we deliver to our, for instance, our employees who are going to be creating requisitions or purchase orders is a different message than the one we have to have with our suppliers. And the timing will be different as well. So we build out a map and of all the people who need to be communicated to at some point in the life cycle of the project. And we strategize when we need to communicate, who needs to do the communication, and what is the message we need to deliver. So we build that together. The other element of managing our stakeholders is managing resistance. One of the first two items of obstacles in terms of obstacles to success for an ERP project is around resistance, employee resistance, manager resistance. It's critical to understand, and this is such a difficult thing for folks, right? Because we're getting into behavior and dealing one-on-one with people. But when you start to see behaviors, either amongst your project team or in the larger stakeholder population itself, when you start to see behaviors that are demonstrating resistance, maybe people are outright saying, I am not going to help support this. Or maybe you have people withdrawing, not showing up to meetings, not delivering on time. These are all indicators that people might be resistant. I'll share an example. I had a client, a manufacturing client in New Jersey. And there was a woman who had been with the company 28 years. She had 2 more years and she was planning to retire. And she was very, very boisterous. She would sit in her cube where everybody could hear her. And she would say out loud, I don't know why we're doing this stupid project. Why can't they just wait for 2 years until I'm out of here? She was so angry and she'd let everybody know. Do you know that impacted everybody in the cubes around her who could hear her? So you have to address that. Worked with her boss talked to her. We tried to get a better understanding of why she was so fearful. And then we built in tactics, ways to get her engaged, ways to help her overcome her fear. Of course, by the end of the project, she was our biggest advocate. And she was teaching and training others how to use the system. So it's important to manage the resistance that you see. You can't sweep it under the rug because it will derail a project. I've seen it happen at senior levels of the organization. I had a senior sales executive once, a senior director of sales who was trying to sabotage a project. I'm sure you can imagine it doesn't matter what level you're at. So we identify our stakeholders, we get to know them, we identify what we need to communicate to them and when and how we need to plan for their preparation and support to use the system. The next critical item that is important, to actually sustain a change. So you're putting in this fantastic integrated IT system, you're building out new future processes, you're building efficiencies into the way you operate. But the chances of reverting back to old ways is, the chances are very high. So you can't, what is it? What is the quote? You can't measure, I can't remember the exact quote. My point is, when we identify performance objectives that we want to achieve because of the new processes and the new IT system, we have to identify our key performance indicators. We have to put down on paper our performance metrics. And when we go live, we have to monitor those. We have to determine, are we achieving the benefits? Are we doing the processes in a new way? If we are putting in the talent acquisition module for HCM, and currently it takes us 3 months to get approvals for a new job requisition, what is our new goal? Do we want 24-hour turnaround for approvals now? Do we want to go from 3 months to 24-hour turnaround? Let's document it, and let's state that as a success measure. And then let's monitor it over time. So maybe the first month that you go live, maybe it's still taking 3 months because people are getting used to going into the system and doing approvals of job requisitions. But maybe next quarter, you're down to a month. And maybe a quarter later, you're down to that 24-hour turnaround time for approvals. So you won't be able to recognize your success unless you define what our success will look like and then actually monitor it. This is a big step for some organizations. Our final lever, our seventh lever, is around organizational structure, job roles, and culture. If we are putting in the Infor ERP and we are really transforming our organization, it's really going to upend the way we do business. Sometimes there is a requirement to change job roles, to build new skills and competencies in our people, and to modify our organizational structure. I have a current client right now, one of our Bales clients, who has built a new IT and HR technical support team. So there are 4 folks who used to be out in the HR organization, and now they're part of a new centralized HR technical support team. So they're responding to, yes, some technical issues, but also process related issues and job change related issues. So it's a new opportunity for these folks, but it changed the structure of their organization and it created new job roles. And then culture, of course, depending on the level of change and the depth of change you're looking forward to in your organization, we can do cultural assessments to say, here's how we behave today and how it's positively or negatively impacting our success, and then help to define what the new behaviors, the new norms will be for the organization. Those are our 7 levers of success. It's a lot. So I will stop there for a moment. Does anyone have any questions on our levers for success for change?
Not seeing anything in the chat right now.
Okay, all right. Well, then I am going to move into our implementation methodology. There are typically phases in our methodology. We have inception, elaboration, construction, transition, and then close or optimize the system, as it were. What I shared with you is a lot of information. So it's important, as we identified in one of the original slides, it's important to have an integrated plan. So this slide really represents the organizational change management activities and which phase of a project they would fall into. I want you to notice big picture here that we don't do change management at the end of the project. We don't do change management just before go live, but indeed we start change management at the very beginning of a project. And that's when you're more likely to have more success, because you're starting out at the beginning, you're setting a foundation. That management of the people side of this change is important from day one. You ensure that there's a clear vision, you ensure that the business case is solid, that you can communicate to people why we're doing this to get them on board early, because people don't change overnight. It's a transition. It's a journey. So we take them through the journey during that life cycle of the project. I won't go through all of the details here, but those concepts that I discussed in the prior slide are all neatly put into a project plan based on the phases of our project methodology. I'll point out, if you take a look under the transition bucket, this is when we are training, we're implementing our new processes, we're implementing the system, we're going live with the system, we're applying new skills and competencies. So that means we've identified the new job roles already, and we've identified the skills folks need to learn. We've identified the competencies they need to develop. And we go live, but then also note that we are going to highlight and recognize the successes we've seen, right? We're going to reward our team members who have worked so hard on this project. And this is when we begin to audit and measure our performance in the system with the key performance indicators that we've identified. And then, of course, in our, we don't like to just walk out of a project. It's always important to do some lessons learned, do some feedback, maybe 1 quarter after a go live, to do some assessment, to do some surveys amongst the user group to see how folks are doing, and if we need to step back and do some retraining or do some revisiting of the why behind why we did this to continue to bring people along or reinforce the changes that we want to see. So that is the way we lay out the actual activities and tasks for change management. If we do that, if we do all the change management stuff, then at the end of the day, the organization that I talked about at the beginning, ProSci organization, they also do a survey to say, okay, well, what do you think contributed to your success? And number 1 is an effective and strong executive sponsor. So that's why I indicated the importance of focusing on building a sponsorship roadmap, a sponsor roadmap, so that the sponsor of the project knows what to do, knows how to deal with the people side of this change. Number 2, buy-in from frontline managers and employees. So once you have the frontline managers and employees engaged, they understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, when we're doing it, and we give them the support so they can do it, so they can do their new jobs, that will, of course, lead to success on this project. When we take care of our project team to make sure they have the right skills, they have the right amount of time to commit to the project, and that they have a leader who will support them and motivate them. So your sponsor, your project sponsor, then that is the third most important opportunity for success. Number 4 is continuous and targeted communications. So you need to be consistent with your communication. We start at the beginning of the project, and we do communications throughout the life cycle of the project. It's not just, oh, hey, we're going live next week. Good luck. We start early, and then we communicate frequently to those who need to have the communication to bring them along. And then finally, the well-planned and organized approach, an integrated organizational change management program integrated into the overall project plan is critical. And that wraps us up for your high-level overview of the organizational change management, why it's so important in an ERP project. I'll say it again, the technology piece. And even as painful as data conversion can be, the technology and the data, they don't fight back with you, right? You can make the technology work. You can make the data right and put it into the system. It's the people side that we cannot forget about. We have to be there to support them, equip them, and prepare them so that they want to adopt the system, that they want to learn it and become proficient with it, and utilize it, so that you do, in fact, achieve those benefits that you set out to achieve when you were first writing your business case for this project. Any questions or any answers that you might have?
I don't have anything in the chat. Really, really great presentation, Dawn. Thank you. If anybody wants to unmute and ask questions, now's your time. Okay,
All right.
if we can go to the next slide, and Brian.
Right. Thank you, Dawn, for that presentation and for all that joined today. The rest of July, we have the sessions that will be continuing to be the 16th, 23rd, and 30th. After that, we're going to take a little break, and then we'll be coming back in October for our quarterly informative Fridays. That'll kick back up. And Dawn, if you just want to click to the next slide,
Oh, sure.
and one more. So if you liked what you saw today and or had any questions, we do offer a coffee with consultants. We'll provide a half-hour time with one of our consultants to discuss anything info related. So if you find some of the topics you heard today or the ones coming up and you want to pursue a little further, please reach out at www.balesllc.com, or you can reach out to Molly. Again, thank you all for attending, and we will be talking to you soon. Thanks, Dawn.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a good day.
Thanks,
you. Molly.
Thank you. Goodbye.